GM, everyone. A bit of a skeleton crew today, but we there's a decent amount to talk about here on the farm, so we're still gonna hold town hall. How you doing, Frio?
Doing good, doing good. Quite a last couple of days, but that's just how it goes sometimes in the farm.
Yeah, maybe that's a good place for us to start. Why don't you share a bit about what you've been up to?
So, as per last call, we discussed that the most important thing for the protocol right now was to implement this cultivation factor fix. And we'll go into detail on what the fix is. But as we were implementing that, uh, the Immunifi bug bounty notified us that there was a bug report. And upon investigation, we found that it was valid. So the PCM took immediate action to resolve that. And what that meant in practice was removing the function that had this exploit, uh, such that no, the exploit was not able to be executed and that the protocol was safe. Going on to detail what the exploit was, there was a bug in the allowance implementation of the transfer plots function which allowed an attacker to bypass the allowance uh, and thus was able to steal another user's plots. Uh, that was immediately fixed or immediately removed because that is much faster than fixing it. Uh, and we were planning to fix that in the next PI alongside the cultivation factor. And then the next day, which was this morning, we got in with the same white hat, another very small minor bug, which had to do with the pod marketplace. Uh, just to maybe gloss over, maybe just talk about a little bit of details. And under certain conditions, certain plot listings were able to be purchased with zero Pinto. Uh, and there's quite an edge case where the number of pods available for a listing had to be less than one pod, and the price per pod had to be very, very low in order to capture that one pod. So, while in practice, not a very large bug, it is a bug nonetheless, and, we plan to fix that in this next PI.
Fascinating. And can you maybe give some context or color on those who have been following the security work that we've been doing, particularly the secure beanstalk upgrade? And maybe people wondering, like, I thought everything was secure now. Like, just try to understand the bug in that context.
Yeah. So, secure Beanstalk focuses heavily on I guess, what we would call like the hard assets of the protocol. These are assets in the protocol that the protocol itself does not have direct control over the issuance and burn of. In this state, this really means the ERC20 tokens in the diamond contract. So, Pinto itself is included in this certain, in this set. All the LP tokens that are whitelisted in the silo are included in this set, and all the non-Pinto ERC20 that trades against Pinto are included in this set. So secure Beanstalk, you know, verifies in every transaction there's no inflows or outflows unless specified, and when it is specified, only that amount is transferred. So from a hard asset perspective, it's very secure. Now, when we talk about other assets in the Pinto protocol, there are assets that the protocol issues, namely, for example, stock and pods. These, the native assets of Beanstalk are not liquid, you know, and one of the properties of that, because Beanstalk itself issues these assets, the protocol is able to kind of control when, I guess the distribute not the distribution, but how okay at any time. The PCM has control, has the ability to make modifications to the diamond. And I think in most cases, people kind of think of that as the logic. But the protocol is also able to change its state as well. So, one of the reasons why secure beanstalk doesn't focus on these assets. One, at any time the protocol is able to, although it's not ideal, it is able to revert, any malicious transaction when it occurs because it's part of the diamond. Uh, and two, the service area is much, much greater for the hard assets. And we wanted to focus our resources on securing those. As as if an exploit happened on that, there was no reversion. There's no going back if those were to get stolen. So, for example, just the context of this bug, you know, it is very scary that this bug slipped by. But in practice, given the current state of the protocol, had the attacker exploited it, the protocol, the PCM can take action to revert the transaction to a state where the attack did not happen. Uh, so, from that attack vector, the protocol is secure.
And is it possible with future resources to implement a level of security for stock and pods and fertilizer? I guess fertilizer isn't a Pinto asset, but anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, the the real issue is that these these Pinto assets do not adhere to a standard. Uh, so it's, in theory, it is definitely possible, but due, for example, the nature of stock and how it grows uh, every season, and in our current implementation, although we know in theory how much stock grows a season, in practice, because it takes an interaction for stock to increase, uh, it takes much more state in order to actually guarantee the validity of the stock balances. Uh, so that's, much harder. One of the comparisons, for example, of the hard assets is that the
Harder from the
ERC balance.
perspective that to do it would be to increase the computational load of a given transaction.
Yes, for example, when you think of like source of truth, uh, protocol, for example, stores how much it thinks is, how much value is stored in the protocol. We can compare that with the ERC20 balance, right? That's two sources of truth. We can see if one of them are untrue, if not true, we can fall back to the ERC20 balance of function as the de facto source of truth. Whereas with stock, the only source of truth there is the the total stock that we store on chain and the summation of every user stock balance, uh, which is, practically impossible to perform in the EVM. It does not scale well. Uh, Ideally, we would be able to summate everybody's stock and compare that with the total stock and make sure that on every transaction, new stock is not minted incorrectly. And we could do the same with pods.
Very
But
interesting.
but unfortunately, just due to the computation limits, it's very impractical.
Very interesting. Another issue with the EVM, it seems. Thank you for explaining.
Vendor,
Officially, you can't hear me?
I think you're good now. I think we're good.
I was just saying thank you for explaining all of that. So the update so far is that the fix to the first vulnerability you mentioned has been fixed already, and then the other one is going out in the next PI because it's not urgent. Is that right?
Well, no. The first vulnerability, the cause of it was removed. Uh, just for context, you know, there's like two steps to mitigate the first vulnerability. The first is just to stop it from happening, and the second is to actually implement the fix. Given this was a very time-sensitive action, the first the former was much faster to do perform than the latter. So, in practice, that just meant removing the functionality uh, from the protocol to transfer plots.
Understood.
And I guess, and just to make more fun, it's uh, the plural version, the one where you're able to send multiple plots. The singular plot was functioning fine. So, in practice, there was no functionality loss for regular users during this time.
Understood. This makes a lot of sense. And what is the timeline on when we expect the fix to go out of that next PI?
Uh, my estimation is probably end of day right now. Uh, currently
Awesome.
the signature the transaction is live, and the signers are verifying. We have a very extensive due diligence process with signing and verifying the bytecode of the diamond cut, and it's very extensive, so it just takes a while, truth be told, for all the signers to perform it. So we are currently in that process.
Understood. And then maybe it makes sense now to talk about the cultivation factor work. I believe that's also going out in this PI. Is that right?
Correct. So the cultivation factor gauge system is being updated to change how the cultivation factor adjusts. Uh, Throughout the past week or 2 weeks, we've seen the cultivation factor behave, or we've seen how it behaves during times in which there is a singular tractor order at a certain temperature. And we've seen the behavior of the protocol such that what it does is uh, when a tractor order is performed at a certain temperature, and sells out, next season the cultivation factor increases and the soil amount decreases or increases as well. To how the cultivation factor is currently set up, where it's just a simple binary nature, where if soil is sold out, we increase the cultivation factor, else decrease, is led to the protocol, quickly decreasing its cultivation factor when there is no demand. And this leads to very inefficient soil issuance, or an inability to kind of fill the issue enough soil to allow this single tractor order to sell. Uh, you know, this person has set a tractor order for around 2 weeks now, and I think, let me just look at the bots. He has, completed less than 5% of his order. So we can clearly see an inefficiency here with the tractor system. So after careful discussion with me and Ben, we now update the cultivation factor based on three variables. Soil sold out, which is the original variable, uh, where the soil has mostly sold out, which is a new variable that is a new threshold that kind of defines, if more soil was sown than this amount, soil is mostly sold out, not sold out, not sold out, but mostly sold out. It takes that, it takes the demand of soil, and an additional new variable, which we call the cultivation temperature. The cultivation temperature is, I guess you can call it a high mark, maybe to explain it that way, but it's the temperature in which soil was not, demand for soil was not decreasing and was close to or selling out. And whenever this happens, the protocol marks this temperature and represents it in the cultivation factor. And with now with this new mechanism in which the protocol adjusts the cultivation factor, it's more able to handle these edge cases more, more gracefully, and should lead to more effective soil issuance.
Awesome. I'm personally very excited about this fix. I think it not only fixes the problem, but actually introduces another level of sophistication to the whole thing, such that in various situations with the tractor sowing now, the cultivation factor should always trend towards the amount of demand. The amount of soil as a result of the cultivation factor should always trend towards the actual amount of demand for soil. So this should minimize the number of seasons where soil isn't selling out or isn't almost selling out, which generally is really good practice for the protocol as it tries to establish creditworthiness. I'm very excited to see what happens once this issue is removed. From where I sit, it feels like the protocol was marching slowly but surely towards the value target. But since this bug has been discovered, it seems like there's a lot less demand for sowing and converting at this point being the main thing getting us to pay. I'm very excited to see what we have in the next couple weeks once we put out this fix. Thank you for that update. Thank you for all the work you've been doing to try to get this thing fixed in a timely fashion. I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, me too. I mean, just to talk about other orders that we've seen, you know, there was one order where the tractor blueprint signer wanted to sow a small amount of soil that was, slightly above the minimum cultivation factor, and then stop afterwards. You know, they calculated it such that they would sow just enough such that in one season, if they were not to sow, it would reset and go to zero. But just because, let's say they were sowing 300, the cultivation factor rises from 30 to 270. The next season it goes to 330, so it doesn't sell out, and it goes back down to 30. Due to with a very simple implementation, they were able to kind of manipulate the demand or the temperature based off of that. Now with this fix, get this new cultivation factor, instead of decreasing very steeply down to its minimum, will now stay the same, because this new order would be in the mostly sold out region. So now cultivation factor will stay the same. Furthermore, uh, had it not been mostly sold out, it would slowly decrease until it mostly sold out. So this leads to the cultivation factor staying much higher and letting this person sell more accurately. So very happy for this change as well.
Awesome. Awesome. I think it's a big deal. What else is on your radar, Frio? If anything else, I'm very hard at work with these bug fixes and this cultivation factor thing. Anything else on your mind you want to talk about in the town hall?
Uh, yeah, I mean, in parallel with the cultivation factor, we're updating to convert bonus a branch, with the cultivation factor fix, such that we're able to, the timeline for the cultivation bonus isn't affected by the new cultivation factor. That was my hope. So, probably it's very steady there, and hopefully we can get that very soon. We're still awaiting defaults juice analysis. Currently he's backed up with a lot of things, but hopefully we can get this up to his priority now that the cultivation factor PI will be finally finished. So your next on my radar is getting that analysis, and we can probably have another call sometime this week or next week to discuss what the ideal parameters are for this convert bonus. Other than that, I would also like to spend some time thinking on the, currently we have a convert penalty downwards and a convert bonus upwards. And, not much discussion has occurred in, the inverse, where there was a convert downwards penalty and uh, convert down bonus and a convert up penalty, or convert up a penalty. So, I would like to also spend some time on like what that even means and whether or not that's worthy of even discussing or implementing. Uh, yeah, it feels like the protocol, if it wants full expressivity, should have that ability to do that in the protocol. We do have that ability in practice, but not sure they're effective and useful.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Did you hear me speak at all? It just glitched out.
No, I went on a little monologue. Yeah, I did not hear you speak.
Well, I've been speaking since your monologue ended, but I don't know. I guess the thing glitched me out. Um, I think this is a very interesting topic. You and I have talked about it quite a lot amongst ourselves, where the question really is, in a world where the protocol has all of the basic tools, and I use basic maybe in quotes because now the tools aren't so basic as we talk about the cultivation factor and penalties and bonuses. But in a world where the protocol has all the basic tools in its repertoire to perform, uh, peg maintenance or value target maintenance, uh, now sort of the big interesting question becomes, what does the optimal cycle look like? Uh, and how does that change based on the actual data that the protocol is experiencing? And to try to then zoom out and figure out, like, given that the protocol does run in cycles, how much converting does the system want quickly after a depeg? How much does it want to preserve? This is something I know you've raised with me multiple times. It's like, if converts had been disincentivized in the early days, sure, we would have had potentially more volatility on the downside, but we also likely would have returned to the value target sooner. Uh, so there's an explicit trade-off space there that the protocol, for the first time, it really feels like once we implement the bonus and penalty on both sides, that really becomes the new meta, is trying to perform some evaluation of the state of the system that the system can do for itself to then determine how aggressively the protocol wants to encourage converts or encourage lending at any given time. So I am personally very excited to sort of reach the end of this chapter in the, I think it's like the greater beanstalk development is what I would say, where it's like for the first time we have a model that really does have a full tool belt of tools, and the tools are pretty well designed from where I sit based on the data we've gotten so far, such that now the question is, how do we use the tools most effectively? Um, so this is a discussion and a conversation personally I'm very excited uh, to work on in the coming months. Step one is going to be implementing the bonus and penalty as we've talked about it. Step two or 1.5 will be, I guess we already support it, if you will, on the other side of things, but maybe adding some explicit support. But at that point, it's like, yeah, we can just try to re-engage in more of a high-level monetary policy discussion, which I'm very excited to participate in. So, yeah, it feels like we're reaching a real checkpoint for the overall protocol development.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. So I'm like, even though we have these tools now, like we don't have the technically we don't have the full tool set. We don't have the convert down bonus and convert up penalty. You feel like we're still sufficient. We're at the point where the tools are sufficient enough to uh, get us, like you said, we want the protocol to be able to express its, how it wants to perform its cycles. You think the convert bonus up and the convert penalty down is enough to have the protocol express it in that way?
Well, I think particularly the thing that is missing that you've talked so much about is the ability to disincentivize converts up at the inopportune time. So that would require a penalty for converting up, not just converting down. Um, I don't think a bonus to convert down is nearly as necessary. Um, the protocol
Totally.
already has incentives in place to do that. But I think to get to the point where it's like truly a full tool belt, we do need a penalty to convert up. But I don't think that that's necessary for us to start to engage in the conversation about what type of decisions the protocol wants to make, if that makes sense. Uh, so that's maybe like to complete the tool belt. That is one last whistle or bell that we need. But I don't think that that comes in place of us being able to do the greater analysis. Like in the short term, if we get the bonus and penalty that we currently have implemented, I think that will get us a tremendous amount of data, particularly if we can get that live before we complete this cycle. If you know what I mean, like if we return to the value target before, after this goes live, we'll get a lot of data about how the current setup that we have works. Obviously, it's not a bad thing if we return to the value target before this goes live. It just means we won't necessarily get the same data as to how the bonus and penalty work, at least as good data. But I think we're getting to the point where we can start to think about what are the factors that the protocol might consider to determine what a penalty to convert up might look like, you know? I think currently though, like even with the penalty and the bonus, the way that these are being implemented are pretty like static in nature, which is still just designing like, can the protocol, if it wants to return to the value target, can it? If you know what I mean. Something like the penalty for converting up, that's a different beast from the perspective of that's actually not about keeping the value target in the moment. That's not a present thing. That's like a more meta thing. Like the protocol would prefer you don't convert now, so you convert in a few seasons. Right now, the protocol doesn't have any of that, if you know what I'm saying. So the convert up penalty, that's more related to a meta monetary policy discussion versus the bonus and penalty that we're implementing right now is much more directly related to straight peg maintenance, or value target maintenance. You could say the penalty for converting down is closer to the more meta level stuff, and I think you're right about that if you said that. But I still think it's a pretty significant difference, like the protocol wanting to log good data at the value target and thereby disincentivizing some converts just for a sec, for a couple seasons, versus the protocol doesn't want converts towards the value target when it's below the value target. That's a significant leap, if you know what I'm saying. So I do view them as pretty different, and I think we can start to have the conversations about the more meta discussion and more meta monetary policy as soon as the convert bonus and penalty we're currently working on is live. I think at that point it becomes very interesting to start engaging in that more meta discussion. But I think in order to execute the meta conclusions, we will need a convert up penalty.
Yeah, it's interesting you say the convert up bonus is less of the meta discussion than the convert down penalty, which I agree with. But I guess on the other hand, with the convert up bonus, you say like it's a bonus that you applied at the season, and directly affects paid maintenance. For me, I foresee the convert bonus having some effect on disincentivizing people to convert now, rather than later. You know, if I'm a person who is in an LP that will probably be, not the highest LP deposited in a silo, you know, I understand that I can capture a bonus in the future, even if it's limited. Uh, and I can make a trade-off so that I can wait to convert later and still have exposure to my non-Pinto assets, depending on market conditions. So, from our perspective, it does lend itself to disincentivize converts, and immediately after its value target. So not as much a convert penalty. Wondering your comment on how we want to have this meta discussion once we have it implemented. Do you feel like we can't have that meta discussion now and discuss the last, I think, past 6 months without the bonus and see how the protocol was able to, what was the current curvature of the cycles without any bonus or penalty? Even though we do have a penalty now with the convert down, technically in practice we haven't seen it in action. So for me, it'd be really cool to see it we're approaching its value target now with just a fuel snowball. Now, after this new cycle, hopefully, we're able to see the new cycle with these convert bonuses. I guess your comment is that you want to see the cycle kind of play itself out and compare the two.
I don't know if that's my perspective exactly. Um, I think on the one hand, we have beanstalk data, we have Pinto's first growth cycle and debt cycle, even though the debt cycle is not completed. There's plenty of data to start doing analysis. Um, I don't mean to say that we, if only we had the bonus and penalty live, in its entirety, then we'd be able to like get the data. I don't think that's fair or reasonable. I think we already have a tremendous amount of data from multiple cycles, from multiple protocols, about how a lot of the user behavior works in terms of inflows and outflows. Um, a lot of the data on the Pinto side of things has only recently gotten prepared. Shout out Pinto Pirate. That data is tremendously insightful. So that's not the point I'm trying to make. Like we can't make progress until we do all this other stuff. For me, it's just a process thing. Like until we do all the stuff that just gets the model to a place where it has all the tools that we can envision, it feels a little bit misguided for us to now try to figure out like in the protocol instead of just trying to return the price to the value target consistently, which is already sort of an impossible task, if you will. Some say it is impossible. I think our model does a great job of showing that it is possible. But I think that to take the next step and say not only is it possible, but we can do it more efficiently than just doing it in general. I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves if we start to really seriously engage in that conversation before we've crossed our T's and dotted our I's in terms of just giving the model all of its tools that we can envision, if that makes sense. So that's not to say if we come up with new tools in the future that we should stop doing the more meta monetary policy cycle discussion or research. Absolutely not. For me, it's just like with a project like Beanstalk and now Pinto, I think it's essential that the lowest hanging fruit that is obviously beneficial towards our goals, that we take those steps and deliberately before we sort of bite off a big apple, which to me, or a big bite from an apple, which to me, doing this more meta, like when even want converts, that has to do with how much that has to do with how much did the protocol just grow and what type of demand was there. Like to even engage in that discussion is a real luxury to me. And I feel like we're much better off getting to the checkpoint where we feel like we've equipped the model with all these tools, and now we can engage in the next discussion, which is like, what's the best way to use all these tools? But I say let's get the tools and know that they work first before we engage in that discussion. So that's my philosophy on this front is like there's already so much uncertainty in the model and its ability to just perform at all. I want us to get to a point where we feel like the model is performing in line with what we expect it to, and then we can engage in the behavioral question about like what does the optimal cycle look like, if you know what I'm
Got it. Yeah, makes sense to me. I'm in full agreement of philosophy.
for me it's a very exciting time in the protocol development. Like we've been at this for going on 5 years, and it's amazing that we're potentially almost at that point where it's like, yeah, now we can actually engage in this higher level discussion or higher order discussion about how the cycle should work, as opposed to just creating the tools for the protocol to receive. I'm motivated to do the work. I'm very excited to do the work. Just from where I sit, it feels like a good move for us to lock in all the tools that we've already conceived of before we, shift significant amounts of resources to this other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like soon we'll need another Beanstalk state space.
Well, that one took me a couple months to prepare, so give me a little time. But I think you're right. I think you're generally totally right. Anything else on your end for you? This is a tremendous amount of content from your end.
think that's all I have for now and this week. Uh, hopefully by the next town hall, we'll have the convert bonus live, or sorry, at least the cultivation factor fixed live. And, and next week I'll share an update on how the convert bonus is going. But yeah, I'm also in the same boat. I really want this convert bonus live as soon as possible.
Awesome. I don't think any of the other active contributors are here, so we don't really have a good opportunity to talk about what's on their mind. But I think it speaks really, really highly of what's going on here. The clearly how much work is happening under and for you. So thank you very much for coming and sharing with everyone what you're up to. On my end, I don't have any big topics to talk about. I was gonna complain a bit about the cultivation factor and just how it is slowing down the protocol. But given that the fix is gonna go live hopefully tonight, uh, doesn't feel like the best use of time. Other than to say, I think it can't. It really has been a big friction. And I discount a little bit the downward price movement over the past 2 weeks because of this bug. And I'm personally very excited and looking forward to seeing what happens once this gets fixed. So that's really the only thing on my mind at the moment that feels significant. But it's hard to like understate, given that the protocol is credit based in nature. Like I do view it as essential and fundamental that the field is operating healthily in order for us to feel like the data that's being collected is, I don't know if legitimate is the right word, but meaningful certainly. So I'm very much looking forward to getting this fixed and then sort of resuming hopefully positive momentum shortly thereafter. So that's the only update on my end. Why don't we just leave the floor open for 30 seconds to see if there's anything anyone else wants to bring up. But otherwise, I think we'll end it here. Going once, going twice. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Thank you for doing. We'll see everyone next week.
See you guys.